All right, guys, Dr. Baker here. Let's talk a little bit about heart disease. It's a huge, huge topic. It's still in the United States. It's the #1 killer of people. You know, in the United States, one person about every 34 seconds has a heart attack. So it's a real serious issue here. And there's a lot of beliefs around what causes heart disease. Certainly we hear that serum cholesterol, particularly LDL cholesterol, has been associated with heart disease, and some people will say it is absolutely causal. They're more sort of precise and will say the ApoB fragment is what's causing that. However, there is a lot of information out there coming out in recent research that suggests that maybe it's not as cut and dried as some people would have us to believe. Now, people say, well, it's saturated fat. Saturated fat can sometimes raise LDL cholesterol, and therefore it leads to heart disease. Again, we have to look at the source of the saturated fat, the whole food that it's in. Is LDL cholesterol by itself completely causative? Is it necessary and sufficient to cause it? Some people say it is. I personally have a little bit different thought on this. I'll share at the end of the video. We may want some nuance here. What I want to do is credit Dr. Malcolm Kendrick and then subsequently Dr. Paul Mason, both of which I've interviewed, and I know Paul reasonably well. Have done a job talking about maybe there's some alternative hypothesis of what may be driving cardiovascular disease. And so, again, the global burden of heart disease, one study showed about 523 million people worldwide had heart disease in 2019. So that's quite a bit. Now, heart disease develops when plaques build up inside the walls of arteries. Now, this plaque is made up of multiple layers of red cells, fibrin tissue, fibrin scar tissue, and, of course, cholesterol. And then eventually that can become calcified. Over time, this plaque will build up within the artery wall. And then what happens is, we can have an acute myocardial infarction, aka a heart attack, atherosclerosis, or other types of coronary artery disease. Now, what's going on and how does this occur in the first place? Well, there typically has to be an inciting event, damage to the artery itself. And so some sort of damage occurs, and then there is an attempt to repair that. And cholesterol is involved in the repair process, as are the red blood cells, the immune system, the white cells, all come in there to try to fix things initially. Now, if the ongoing damage continues to occur, then we get this buildup of this plaque sort of substance. And so we have a scar that sort of forms on the internal surface of the artery. Now, once it builds up enough, it can start to occlude the vessel flow, and then what happens in a heart attack is that a little piece of that plaque will break off, and it'll move downstream to a smaller, it'll go to a smaller and smaller vessel, and then it'll plug it up completely, and then no blood flow gets through, and then we start to have, and if it's in our coronary vessels, the vessels that supply our heart, and then we get no ability to get oxygen or any nutrients to the heart, and the heart has problems. We start to feel it, it's painful, and we get rushed to the emergency rooms, and hopefully we don't die on the spot. So that is something. So it's important to try to avoid that. Obviously, no one wants to die early, particularly of a heart attack. Now, there's a lot of people who are going to die in their 90s and 100 of a heart attack, and that's a little different story. But we don't want that happening early. So what is causing some of this damage? Well, there's oxidation that's occurring. Oxidation on a cellular level is when electrons are moving around and different atoms are gaining or losing electrons. Rust is a form of type of oxidation. So you can kind of think of it like your body is rusting on the inside. And so what is causing this oxidative stress to occur? Well, stress in general. So a stressful environment can actually cause oxidative stress. We know that things like pollution, cigarette smoking in particular. We know high levels of glucose, hyperglycemia or massive excursions in the blood glucose is very stressful and also very damaging. There are autoimmune inflammatory conditions which are highly associated with cardiovascular things like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and things like that, where we have this chronic inflammation. Now, there's some people who will point to the quote-unquote seed oils as particularly damaging as an alternative hypothesis. And why might that be the case? Well, we know that many of these seed oils are highly, highly oxidized. And so if you see things like flaxseed, it typically has to be refrigerated. If it comes out of the refrigerator, it starts to oxidize. There was a study looking at walnut oil, and they found that walnut oil at room temperature over a matter of just a few days was subject to greater and greater oxidation to where it was significantly oxidized. And so when you consume these things, well, it may lead to oxidation within the body and therefore this stress. Now, in the preparation of these oils, they're often deodorized because when they initially get oxidized, they start to smell bad. They smell pretty bad, apparently. Reportedly, I've not had a chance to smell those, and hopefully I don't get to, but this rancid oil smells bad, and so they have to be masked with this deodorizing process. And then it has to get reheated again, and this doubly heated oil can become even more oxidized and become even more pro-inflammatory. The seed oils don't provide any real nutrition other than they are a source of fat, but they're not high in things like vitamins and minerals. And so eating them in a significant fashion may lead to problems. Now, there is something in there called campesterol, which sounds like cholesterol, but it is a plant version of cholesterol. And what happens is it's so close in structure, you can see its structure here in this diagram, that often the body will confuse and take it up into the structure. Remember, cholesterol is part of all of our cell walls, or cell membranes rather. Plants have cell walls, sorry, but our cellular membranes have lots of cholesterol incorporated in that. And then when we start having these plant cholesterol, analogs in there, it can start to cause problem. And if it's occurring within our vascular tree, then we can lead to oxidative damage, and then we start to see this process of damage occurring. So things you might want to avoid are high sugar diets, maybe refined grains, perhaps some of these seed oils, and then go ahead and eat saturated fat, guys. Eat meat, eat dairy, eat eggs, eat it to satiety. Eat enough so you don't want to be gaining body weight and body fat. I mean, I think that's still an issue because remember, as we have excess body fat, we're going to be in this pro-inflammatory state. But if you can eat, meat, eggs, and things like that to satiety, not put on weight, you're going to be doing very well. The other thing I didn't mention was blood pressure. Blood pressure is also very important when we think about what are setting things up for heart disease. If you have hypertension, and what I see a lot of times is people going on a low carbohydrate diet, meat-based elimination diets, carnivore diets, ketogenic diets, is often their blood pressure normalizes. And so what I would like to say is I think, what we're seeing with regard to LDL cholesterol is it's looking more and more like it is a dependent variable. There was a large study that looked at a population where they had 0 coronary artery calcium scans. So they had no heart disease. Their LDL cholesterol did not predict in any way whether they were going to develop a cardiac event, something called a MACE, a major adverse cardiac event. So what it's looking like is if you have the environment, the right environment, the pro-oxidative environment to damage the inflammation, the hyperglycemia, and the high blood pressure in place, then high levels of LDL cholesterol might in fact be more likely to be damaging. But if you get rid of those other factors, then perhaps higher LDL may not be as big of a concern. Now, can't say that with certainty, but there are studies in progress right now that may help us shed some light on that in the very near future. All right, guys, if this has been helpful for you, don't forget to like, subscribe, share this, hit the notification bell. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.